There's shocks in life that don't come from loud explosions, but from a silence that is utterly decisive. And within the distorted inner world of a narcissist, that silence, when you leave without tears, without begging, simply as yourself, whole and free, is their collapse. You're not just walking away from a toxic relationship, you're dismantling an entire system of manipulation designed to keep you small. Today, we're going to unpack what few dare to put into words, why your calmness is the narcissist's greatest nightmare. Join me until the end of this journey, where you'll not only gain deep psychological insight into the manipulator's mind, but also discover the power to reclaim the right to define yourself. If you see yourself in the words about to be shared, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because every video here is a step on your path to healing. Would you like me to turn this into a full video script? 1. Silence. The weapon they cannot control. You don't need to scream. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to hurt anyone. In the rarest moments of awakening, the most powerful thing you can do is remain silent and walk away. No blame, no final glance. And in that silence, something profound happens. You withdraw the unconscious consent you once gave the narcissist. The consent that allowed them to shape your emotions, your thoughts, and your sense of worth. Because what the narcissist truly craves isn't love, it's not understanding, it's control. They don't need you to love them unconditionally or even understand them. What they need is the invisible ability to dictate how you feel about yourself, how you react to them, and even how you perceive reality. And for a long time, you didn't realize you were living inside a frame they constructed. Your departure, especially when you don't spiral into argument, is a direct strike to that psychological structure. Because when you don't react, when you don't beg, when you don't respond according to their script, you break a psychological contract, one you never agreed to, yet were forced to live by. Imagine this. They're used to you apologizing even when you did nothing wrong, to you trying to make everything better, to you explaining, debating, trying to prove your worth. All of that, though it seems like resistance, is still interaction. It still places them at the center of your life. But when you choose to walk away quietly, without theatrics, you're not just exiting a relationship. You're exiting the very world they built to preserve their false self. For the narcissist, control isn't just a preference or habit. It's their operating system. It's where they hide from the emptiness inside. When you no longer allow them to dictate your emotions, when you stop giving them the power to control your reactions, you force them to confront the truth they cannot bear. They are no longer the center of your universe. And that is truly terrifying for them. Not because they ever loved you deeply, but because your presence once served as the mirror that reflected the illusion they clung to. When you leave in silence, you're not just stepping out of a role, you're bringing the entire stage crashing down. You need to understand this. Your presence was never just about being there. It was about validation. It was fuel. It was supply for the false self they couldn't sustain on their own. Whether you gave through love or tears, through anger or hope, it all served as nourishment for that bottomless ego. And when you no longer play a part in their narrative, you forced them to face a void they themselves cannot comprehend. There's no one left to manipulate, no one left to blame, and no one left to affirm their delusion of being special. The harsh truth is this: the narcissist doesn't know who they are without someone else to define them. They live through the image reflected back by others. They need someone to continue the story they tell themselves, that they are the victim, the hero, the misunderstood genius. But when you refuse to play that part, you sever the lifeline, and they begin to unravel, not because they lost you, but because they lost the mirror that sustained their identity. And here's the deeply profound part. Your silence becomes the most honest mirror of all. Because it reflects nothing, it doesn't respond, it doesn't validate, it doesn't glorify, it simply exists. And in that still existence, the narcissist is forced to confront the true emptiness. Because without someone to reflect them, they are left with nothing. This is not punishment, it's reality. A reality they've spent their entire lives running from. Because beneath the mask, beneath the facade of power and charm, is someone who's never truly believed they are worthy, unless someone else affirms it for them. And you, the one who was once controlled, once caught in their whirlwind, no longer need them to feel worthy. That is the real blow, because you didn't just walk away. You did something far greater. You refused to act in a script written by manipulation. You rewrote your story, not through rebuttals, not through revenge, but through one quiet, powerful act. I no longer belong to your world. And in doing so, you didn't just reclaim your power. You began an entirely new chapter 1 of awakening, freedom, and healing. 2, when you leave, you're not just leaving a person. What terrifies the narcissist isn't that you expose them, is that you are no longer under their control. No reactions, no rage, no arguments, just one silent yet steady step. And it's enough to bring their entire inner world crashing down like a tower propped up by illusions, because what you've broken is not just a relationship. It's the entire psychological structure they depended on to exist. A structure built upon your consent. Consent you may have never even realized you gave. You once allowed them to regulate your emotions. You once let them redefine right and wrong. You fell into the most insidious trap of all, believing you were the problem and they were the center of every solution. But now, by quietly walking away, you've made a statement as clear as it is devastating. I no longer live in the world you created. And to a narcissist, that's not just rejection. It's an existential threat. It strikes at the core of the false self they must constantly sustain with other people's energy. When you stop serving as their supply, when you no longer feed them validation, fear, admiration, or even anger, you don't just disappear from their grasp. You force them to confront themselves. And the truth is this: they are incapable of facing themselves. Beneath the mask of confidence, charm, or control is an empty soul. One that has never been nurtured by real love, but has only functioned through roles of domination or victimhood. They lack a stable internal core to define their worth without external reactions. Do you know why they were once able to control you so easily? Because you have a heart. You wanted to understand. You wanted to save the relationship. You are sensitive, empathetic, and willing to absorb pain just to keep the peace. They relied on that, not to love you, but to maintain their upper hand. They needed you to hurt, needed you to be confused, needed you to always try just a little bit harder, until you forgot who you used to be, until the moment you say enough, not with a scream, not with tears, but with a conscious withdrawal. When you do that, you strike the one weakness they can never defend against: the truth. The truth that you don't need them, the truth that they no longer have power over you, and above all, the truth that you can live and even thrive outside of their control. This is not an act of hatred. It is an act of liberation. From a psychological standpoint, this is an identity crisis for the narcissist. When you step out of their orbit, you don't just take yourself away. You take with you the mirror wall they depended on to see themselves. They looked at you to define who they were. When you were happy, they felt powerful. When you were in pain, they felt justified. When you reacted, they felt real. But now, that's gone. You've unplugged the illusion machine they've operated all their lives. There is no more mirror, no more script to control. And in that moment, they are left exposed with all the emptiness and instability they once projected onto you. They may try to pull you back, call you, text you, pretend like nothing ever happened, or suddenly slander you, tear you down to others. None of this is because they regret what they did. It's because they are panicking over the void you left behind, but you're no longer there. And that is your greatest victory. Not because you hurt them, but because you are no longer trapped in their chaos. Your silence is not avoidance. It is a powerful declaration. I'm no longer playing by your rules. And when you step out of that game, you don't just escape. You shift the balance of power, not with force, but with clarity. The truth is, you were never too weak. You were surrounded by a system designed to make you believe you weren't enough. But when you walked away, you didn't destroy them. You dismantled the illusion they had built around you. That's not destruction. That's truth revealed. And that truth is what the narcissist can never bear. 3, it's not a breakup. It's liberation. When you walk out of the life of a narcissist, they don't just lose a person. They lose the mirror of illusion they once used to define their self-worth. They don't know, or they don't dare admit, that much of what they call self is merely a reflection from others. And in many cases, You were the one playing the role of that mirror. You weren't just a companion. You were a supporting character in the script they wrote, a tool to sustain the illusion that they were more important, more righteous, more influential. And tragically, it was you, through your kindness, empathy, and need to be loved, who unconsciously agreed to that role until one day you stopped. When you quietly withdrew, not with screams, not with revenge, not with justification. You didn't destroy them. You simply shattered the illusion they built and that you once believed was real. That's when their defense system begins to crack. Not because you were too strong, but because for the first time in their life, they're forced to face themselves without you to hide behind, and they have no internal tools to cope with that. They lack the ability for self-reflection. They don't know how to confront inner truths. They have no map for their inner world, because that world was never truly formed from within. Most narcissists aren't inherently evil. They are the product of hidden wounds. They learn to control so they wouldn't get hurt. They learn to manipulate so they wouldn't be abandoned. But the tragedy is this: when you take away their control, they don't feel liberated. They feel betrayed. Not because you were wrong, but because in their eyes, your withdrawal is a rejection of the entire self they struggled to construct. And to them, that's not just heartbreak, it's an identity collapse. They once believed you would always be there, that you would always forgive, always try, always seek to understand them. They mistook your endurance as a kind of eternal contract, a promise you never actually signed. And when you tore up that contract and walked away, they felt overthrown, not by hatred, but by an uncompromising truth. You had awakened. And that is what they cannot endure. Because you didn't just leave physically, you withdrew the role they needed you to play. They are no longer the victim, no longer the misunderstood genius, no longer the powerful figure. Now they are simply a person, exposed, wounded, and with no one left to validate their existence. Do you see where the cruelty of your silence comes from? It's not because you wanted to hurt them. It's because your silence reflects back to them a truth that is impossible to deny, that everything they once believed no longer holds value, that their power was an illusion, that the affection they thought they received was merely borrowed from your fear, your pity, your need to prove your worth. And what makes your departure powerful enough to collapse their entire psychological system is this: it's no longer built on emotional weakness. It's built on clarity, on resolve, and on the deep realization, I do not need you to be myself. They will try to pull you back. They will call you cruel. They will call you selfish. But that no longer matters, because you no longer live within their frame of reference. You've stepped out of a world that only existed as long as you believed in it. And here is the most beautiful truth: your withdrawal is not just an ending. It is a rebirth. No longer manipulated by emotional coercion, you begin to feel yourself purely. You know what you feel, not because someone tells you how you should feel. You begin to think differently, choose differently, live differently, and no voice in your head tells you how you must be in order to be loved. And in that moment, the moment you realize you are walking forward without carrying the false self they imposed on you, that's when they truly understand they have lost you. Not a lover, not a servant, but they're supplied the energy source they used to sustain their illusion of self. And no one else can replace you. Not because you were so special to them, but because you were the mirror they used to avoid seeing themselves. And now the mirror is shattered. There's no one left to reflect the illusion. And all they have left is the truth, a truth they never wanted to know, that you were never weak, that you never needed them to exist, that every ounce of power they once had was never real. They only had power because you believed they did. Now you know. And once you know, you are free. What they fear isn't the truth, it's that you see the truth. In the emotionally chaotic world of a narcissist, nothing disorients them more than your calm. They are prepared for your rage, for an explosive breakup, for tears and blame, for drama and emotional outbursts. But what they are never prepared for, and never can be, is complete silence. To someone who thrives on manipulation, silence is not merely the absence of words. It's a signal that they no longer control the emotional center of your world. It's an empty space where they no longer have a place, no longer hold power, no longer play any role they can cling to. You may have once believed that anger was power, that speaking all your truths, laying bare all the hurt, would allow you to stand up to them. But the truth is, anger, when it doesn't stem from deep awareness, is still a form of attachment. It keeps you connected to them, even through pain. And that's exactly what they want. Any form of emotional tether, even if it's negative, as long as you still react, still hurt, you are still within their orbit. But when you choose silence, it's not because you're suppressed. It's because you no longer wish to engage in their language of chaos. That silence doesn't just confuse them, it terrifies them. Because for the first time, you are no longer being guided by their words, actions, or emotional games. You are now operating from an entirely different framework, a framework rooted in your inner self. Silence becomes the unspoken declaration: I've taken the wheel of my life back. No longer will they define who you are. No longer will they dictate what emotions you should feel. No longer will they lead your thoughts, your behaviors, or your beliefs. And what the narcissist cannot bear is the fact that you no longer see them as the center of your universe. To them, importance isn't measured by whether you love or hate them. It's measured by whether you think about them, whether you react to them, whether you continue to spin inside their narrative. When you leave in silence, you commit the one unforgivable act in their eyes. You remove them from the axis of your life. You make it clear, I am no longer a supporting role in your script. I am the lead in my own story. And this is perhaps the most profound truth of all. True calm cannot be faked. You cannot pretend not to react if deep inside you are still angry, still wounded and unhealed. And it's precisely because your silence is real, because it comes from a place of deep healing, that the narcissist simply cannot handle it. They can manipulate emotions. They can toy with tears or resentment, but they don't know how to deal with silence that comes from awakened awareness. The kind of awareness that says, I no longer need anyone's validation to exist. I don't need to stay in a place that is no longer healthy. I don't need to react to prove anything anymore. To them, silence is the end of a game they never wanted to stop playing. They don't care whether you're hurt or happy, in love or angry. As long as you're still playing, but now you're not. You've put down the piece, withdrawn your hand from the board, folded the game that you never agreed to play in the first place. And so they become confused, angry, manipulative. They try to pull you back. They slander. They suddenly turn soft, only to turn cruel again in a flash. All of it, just to get you to react. Because when you react, they exist again. But you don't react, and that is the victory. Not a victory over them, but a victory over yourself. A triumph over the fear of abandonment, over the fear of being misunderstood, over the fear of not being able to defend yourself. A victory over the temptation to just explain one last time. Because now you understand, not everyone deserves your explanation. Not everyone who hurt you deserves another chance to do it again. Your silence is a message to the universe. You have chosen yourself. And from that moment, something miraculous begins to happen. You start to breathe more evenly, feel lighter, sleep more deeply. You no longer check your phone waiting for a message. You no longer write long mental monologues to make them understand. You let go. And silence is no longer emptiness. It becomes the space where you finally listen to yourself. That's when you realize peace doesn't lie in the narcissist's forgiveness. It doesn't lie in a final conversation. It doesn't lie in an apology that never comes. It lies in your right to walk away without needing to explain yourself any further. And if they ever made you believe you were small, weak, or unworthy, then it is your silence right now that proves the opposite. You are strong, you are clear-minded, and you have saved yourself. 5. You didn't just leave them, you took yourself back. When you walked away, you didn't just end a relationship. You removed a mirror, the very mirror the narcissist used to define their sense of self. And it is that loss, more than anything, that causes their collapse. Make no mistake, they're not heartbroken over a love lost. They're grieving the loss of power, the loss of control, the loss of their main audience in the performance they've carefully staged all this time, a performance in which you were cast in supporting roles. The one who suffers, the one who needs saving, or the one to blame, depending on whatever role they needed you to play in that moment. You weren't loved. You were used to affirm their ego And when you no longer played that role, the entire performance unraveled. You didn't just disappear from their life. You took away their entire system of reflection, the system that helped them cover up their inner emptiness. They no longer had you to blame, to mirror their false superiority, to extract emotion from. No one was left to define them. And that caused their fragile, externally constructed identity to begin to shake. Amid the wreckage, they couldn't find themselves. Because the truth is, they never built a true self, only a replica copied from others' reactions. They exist like an empty mirror, only visible when someone is looking into it. And you were that gaze. You were the stream of emotional energy they fed on, whether it was love, anger, tears, or effort. As long as you reacted, they felt real. But now you don't. You did what they could never imagine. You walked away without looking back. And that's when the unraveling began. In the chaos, they didn't just see someone walking out. They witnessed themselves falling apart. They have no internal stability to hold themselves up. Because from a young age, perhaps, they learned to construct identity, not from authentic worth, but by manipulating the worth of others. And it's their primary now. You were once the center of it all. That is the bitter yet profound truth. They don't know who they are unless someone is there to define them. Your presence once patched over their inner cracks. Every time you suffered because of them, they felt important. Every time you apologized, they felt righteous. Every time you endured in silence, they felt powerful. But now, all of that reflection has vanished. And what remains? The truth, the raw truth. The truth that they are not as strong as they believed. The truth that they no longer have influence. The truth that you have awakened and you no longer need them to exist. And you know what the most beautiful part is? You once lost yourself too, but unlike them, you found your way back. On your journey out of manipulation, you didn't just reclaim your right to choose, you reconstructed your identity. You began asking questions. Who am I when I'm no longer being controlled? What do I truly want when I no longer need to please anyone? What do I really feel when I'm no longer burdened by the emotions of others? Each of those questions became a brick you laid into the foundation of a new self. A self no longer dependent on external validation. A self that knows when to stay silent, that listens inward, that says no without guilt, and most importantly, a self that knows how to love itself without needing permission. That is the difference between you and them. They lost you, and with you, they lost themselves. You lost them, and in doing so, you found yourself. And that's why your healing doesn't just confuse them, it terrifies them, because it reveals something they've spent their whole life trying to deny. They never had the power to write your story. They hold the pen, and you are no longer continuing the old chapter. You are writing a new one of growth, freedom, and self-awareness. A chapter where you are no longer a victim. A chapter where you have nothing to prove, just the right to live fully in your truth. And while they try to continue their performance with new audiences, with new roles, they can never erase one undeniable fact. You stepped out. 6. When you stop reacting, you start taking control. It's not the anger, not the accusations, and certainly not the punishment. What truly causes the narcissist to unravel is when you stop feeling altogether. When their name no longer makes your heart race. When memories of them no longer confuse or wound you. When they, once the center of your emotional universe, become nothing more than a faded name in your past. That isn't coldness, it's freedom. We're often taught that in order to move on from someone, we must confront them, say everything, demand justice. But what few people tell you is this. Every time you try to get closure from someone who has no concept of wrongdoing, you only prolong your emotional attachment to them. The narcissist doesn't care how angry you are, as long as you're still angry, because anger is still a form of connection, a type of emotional engagement they can twist, exploit, counter, or feed on. To them, your feelings are fuel. It doesn't matter if it's love or hate, so long as it's about them. But indifference, that difference. True indifference is the invisible declaration that they are no longer the main character in your story. And for the narcissist, that is a fatal blow, because what they fear most isn't being hated, it's being forgotten, no longer reflected, no longer the center, no longer anyone. In the mind of a narcissist, there exists a kind of inverted emotional logic. In that world, being hated still validates their worth. It still confirms that they can affect you, disturb you, stir you up. But when you no longer care, when you no longer wonder what they think, what they're doing, whether they're happy or suffering, you've cut the final cord between you and them, the need to respond. And that's what leaves them confused, disoriented, even desperate. True indifference cannot be faked. You cannot pretend not to care when inside you're still aching, still waiting, still wounded. Because that pretense is still a performance, a subtler form of attachment, and the narcissist senses it immediately. They read it and they will poke holes in that facade, trying to pull you back into the emotional game you've fought so hard to escape. But if your indifference is real, if it has been built through a long process of healing, confronting your darkness, learning hard lessons, and reclaiming yourself, then no manipulation tactic can penetrate it. It is a kind of strength the narcissist fears most, because it does not react, it does not retaliate, and it does not pity. It simply says, I moved on. What will they do then? They'll try to return with apologies, with sudden softness. They'll remind you of shared memories and past bonds. And when that fails, they'll switch tactics, smearing your name, devaluing you, speaking ill of you. But none of it is truly about you. It's a battle they are waging with themselves, a desperate attempt to regain a sense of existence at any cost. They don't need your love, they need your role. They need your reaction, whether agreement or defiance, begging or rage, as long as you still react. Because in your reaction, they still have a part to play. They still exist in your eyes. And that's what makes true indifference the final blow. Not loud, not dramatic, but powerful enough to bring their entire identity system crashing down. You no longer reflect them back, which means there are nothing in your world. And you, the one who was once made to believe you were weak, not enough, dependent, are now the one holding the greatest power of all. The power not to care anymore. You didn't earn that power through anger. You earned it through healing, through detoxing from emotional addiction, through releasing the need to be validated by the one who hurt you. You learned how to sit with pain without running, how to feel without reacting. And then one day you woke up and realized they were gone from your nervous system. No more flinching at the sight of their name. No more wondering, are they thinking about me? No more need to win an argument you were never allowed to win, because you've left the game board. And in there, in the silence, in gratitude toward yourself, you find a peace the narcissist will never be able to reach. 7. No screaming, no tears, only the truth. You didn't just walk away from a relationship. You ended a role. And for the narcissist, that is a loss beyond measure, not because of love, but because their identity was built around the role you once played. In the narcissist's world, identity isn't stable. It isn't an inner foundation they've explored or nurtured. Their identity is a fabricated structure, pieced together from the reactions and emotions of others, especially you. When you were there, they existed. When you left, the void you created wasn't just an absence, it was the collapse of their entire self-definition system. You were once the main object they looked to and thought, I'm powerful, I'm desired, I'm admired, I'm special. And even when you were in pain, crying, trying to fix things, they interpreted it all as evidence of their importance. They live in a reality where their existence is dependent on how others respond to them. So when you withdraw, when you no longer react, no longer try to understand, no longer fix, they no longer know who they are. And don't be mistaken, this isn't a moment of awakening or growth. No, for the narcissist, it's a moment of internal chaos where they're forced to confront what they've always run from, the emptiness within. No one left to blame. No one left to label as the problem. No one left to endure or to serve as the backdrop for the image they tried to project. No mirror, and therefore no reflection. And if you've ever wondered, do they feel the loss? The answer is yes, but not in the way you think. They don't mourn the loss of you as a person. They mourn the loss of a tool for self-reflection. The loss of the screen they used to hide the truth, that they have no real self to return to. You were the projector screen on which they played the movie of themselves. And when you stepped away, the screen went dark, the lights went out, and the theater fell silent. What remained was the truth. And for the narcissist, that truth is unbearable. They cannot sit alone in silence and listen to their inner voice, because that inner world is chaos. repressed memories, unresolved pain, and denied moral conflict. They flee from their own minds by inhabiting roles. They build personas: the hero, the victim, the misunderstood genius, the master of control. And you, the one who reflected those personas, played a vital supporting role in every one, but not anymore. He stepped off the stage. No screaming, no tearing down the backdrop, no explanation needed. You simply stopped acting. And that single act caused the entire illusion to collapse in silence. No accusations, no final applause. You just walked away. And in that silence, you did what no punishment or act of revenge ever could. You forced them to face themselves. They may thrash about, find a new audience, rewrite the story with someone else, but deep down, they know that the role that made them feel most real was the role you once played. And what they cannot bear is not that you were more important than others, but that you once believed in them, once responded authentically, once loved them deeply, and then you woke up. That is what terrifies them the most. Not your departure, but the truth that you once loved them with your whole heart and still chose to walk away, because that proves something no manipulation can undo. Truth is stronger than control. Light is stronger than illusion, and self-respect is stronger than captivity. You didn't leave because you stopped loving. You left because you ran out of reasons to keep accepting what was wrong. And that growth, that refusal to continue living in their world, is something no narcissistic script could ever anticipate. You no longer belong to their reality, and they know it. The only thing they can do now is construct a new story, one where you're the villain, the betrayer, the one who suddenly changed. Because to admit the truth, that you awakened, that you outgrew them, would mean admitting they no longer have power, and they can't live with that truth. Maybe you can. You are living with that truth, deeper and stronger with each passing day. The truth that you have the right to choose yourself again, the right to say no, and the right to heal without anyone's permission, the right to release the past without needing anyone to admit they were wrong, and above all, the right to move forward, not as a victim, but as someone reborn. 8. It doesn't destroy them. You shatter the illusion. The moment the narcissist truly loses you isn't when you walk out the door. It's when you begin to smile. A smile not for them, not for anyone else, but for yourself. When you stand in the sunlight of a new morning and feel a genuine peace within, they know the game is over. You didn't just move on from them. You were reborn. You no longer need to explain, to be believed, or to be understood. You rebuilt yourself, bit by bit, from the wreckage they left behind. And what sends them into panic isn't that you're happy, it's that your happiness no longer includes them. The narcissist lives by a script. They write the roles, cast the characters, build the stage, but you stepped out of the performance, and instead of playing the victim, you rewrote the entire story, not with the pen of revenge, but with the ink of growth, not with bitterness, but with understanding. You understand why they are the way they are, but you also understand why you can't keep living that way. Your healing is not about returning to who you used to be. It's the journey of discovering the person you were never allowed to become because you were too busy reacting, too busy pleasing, too busy surviving in the shadow of conditions, expectations, and manipulation. And now you're no longer in that shadow. You no longer answer midnight calls. No longer overanalyze every word, fearing misinterpretation. No longer sacrifice your self-respect just to keep the peace. You are whole, grounded, and free. That's what stings the most, because you're the one who once trembled at their silence, who cried over their cold words, who felt worthless in their presence, are now calm, clear, and no longer looking back. The narcissists once believed you'd be forever trapped in the web they spun. They never imagined a reality where you would awaken, because in their script, you were the weak one, the dependent one, the one who couldn't live without them. But you didn't just live, you grow, and that challenges their entire belief system. It's like a mirror reflecting a truth they can't deny. They're not as powerful as they believed. They're not in control the way they thought. And they can't stop a soul that has chosen freedom. So they'll try to devalue your healing. They'll say you're faking it, acting out, or being dramatic. But deep down they know you have truly stepped beyond their reach. And that, not any argument, not any confrontation, is their greatest defeat. You don't need to prove it. True peace doesn't need applause. It shows up when you sleep well, when you eat lunch without anxiety, when you no longer flinch at a message from them, when you no longer need to share your story to be understood. because you understand yourself. And the miracle is this: you no longer hate them. You no longer need them to fall for you to rise. You rise for yourself, not for anyone else. You've come to understand that no one can break you unless you hand them the power to do so. And now that power is returned to you, no one has the right to define you, to manipulate your emotions, or to make you question your worth. You've remembered who you were before they stepped in and made you doubt it. And if someone listening to this still feels stuck, remember, they are not the end of your story. They are just a chapter in your book. And you have the power to turn the page whenever you're ready. You don't need their permission. You don't need their blessing. You don't need anyone's understanding. You just need one thing: to choose yourself. If you found this message meaningful, subscribe to the channel for more deep, inspiring insights like this. And remember, the healing journey doesn't begin with forgiving others. It begins with an honest commitment to yourself. In the end, you are not just someone who survived a toxic relationship. You are someone who rose from the ashes, not with a broken heart, but with a renewed sense of self. Stronger, clearer, and more authentic than ever before. You no longer need anyone to validate your worth. You don't need an apology from someone who will never feel remorse. You don't need a perfect ending to begin again. What you need, and what you've chosen, is yourself. The narcissist may have once convinced you that you were merely a reflection of their reactions, that you only existed in their eyes, within their definitions, inside their script. But the day you stopped reacting, the day you quietly closed the door, was the day you began to truly exist. You did what they never expected. You stopped needing them to know who you are. And that is the greatest power you've ever held. Not the power to retaliate, but the power to not need to do anything at all. Just to keep living in truth, walking in peace, and letting the light within you guide the way. Healing is not loud. It doesn't need to be declared. It doesn't require proof. It shows up quietly in the calm that stays when you hear their name and your heart remains still. And your ability to love again without fear. And most of all, in the deep gratitude you feel towards yourself for never giving up. So if you are somewhere in the middle of this journey or just beginning, be patient. There's no rush, but don't go back. Don't let them continue writing the story you've already chosen to end. You don't need to live inside the role someone once assigned you. You're rewriting the entire script, this time with truth. If this video touched something inside you, hit subscribe to walk with us through the next chapters of healing. We are here not to feed resentment, but to illuminate truth. Not to seek revenge on the past, but to rebuild the future. And if there's only one sentence you need to hear today, let it be this: you are not weak for walking away. You are brave for choosing yourself. See you in the next video. And don't forget, silence, clarity, and freedom are the languages a narcissist will never understand, but will always fear the most.